Well, good morning, CSL Columbia or Columbia CSL. We have so many options, don't we? Oh, it's a lovely morning. I'm glad to be back with you. Last week, Dr. Ken Gordon spoke with us. It was a great smash hit, as always. And he stated that science of mind is a cutting edge teaching. Now, you may have heard that before, but it's never more true than in the moment, in the present moment. And he said that what we do is we transform the world together, that each of us are the core of our conscious development, and we must stay the course because what we do does make a difference. So I find that very apt, and I thanked him for being a springboard to our new theme in June, which is called the Soul's Call. For our souls clearly understand what it is that is ours to do. Our soul story is one many of us do not know, actually, but one that all of us search for consciously and unconsciously. Awakening to the spiritual quest to connect with our soul comes to us more so in adulthood, as when we are young, we have the experience to recognize it. And when we are in our twilight years, well, we don't always have the strength or the desire to pursue the changes and the challenges that the search presents. This quest is recognized by sacred traditions everywhere as the very first step in the pursuit of spiritual wisdom. The soul's call is known by many names. I know it as a conversion. You may know it as being summoned. Some refer to it as a change of heart. This turning is described from the circumference to the center, from appearance to reality, from the sensible to the intelligible, from the idea of time to the idea of eternity. There are certainly as many calls as there are human souls, but the voice of the call is always the same, saying, come back, there is still time. So we begin this exploration within the analogy of our soul being housed in a 1,000-room palace. And with so many possible doors to open, can the soul be found? I mean, where is it hiding? Or is it hiding? It is not that the soul is absent. We know that. It is that our faculties of inner sight are not functioning always well enough to see it. So when we experience the world through that tiny slit in our perception, instead of being in touch with our magnificence of our spiritual perfection, it can be said that we are living in the basement of a 1,000-room palace. But then again, perhaps the entire 1,000-room palace is the soul's reflection itself. Dr. Holmes refers to the soul in his teaching symbol of the universal creative process of cause and effect as the creative principle of nature and the law of spirit, the medium through which the power of law of being operates to create all life. And he explains that the soul is the servant to the conscious self-choosing spirit and one with it at the very same time. The conscious spirit we often refer to as love thinks, and the subconscious spirit we refer to as law or the soul executes. Yes, the universal soul is the spiritual law that governs creation, and it can also be associated with our moral compass or the creative energy revealed in works of art, or even a specific quality like the soul of our nation. The soul is the mirror of our mind that reflects the direction of our mind. The spiritual law that faithfully carries out the instructions it is given. Dr. Holmes also stated that cause and effect will forever create the experience of our lives and our work, and the work, rather, is to decide and declare that the cause be in alignment with our soul's highest and best. Now, I understand this last statement as referring to the soul in its most common definition, our individualized essence of the infinite and eternal spirit. So today we're going to explore the soul's call as that inner essence that both receives and reflects the qualities of spirit. Excuse me. So I'd like to start out by posing this question to you, to me. In what form or circumstance does the call of the soul enter our life? Sometimes people hear the call when they have everything they want from life and then discover it is not enough. Conversely, the call can be triggered by a sickness or a setback, by an episode perhaps of suffering in a situation that is so intolerable. A person is forced to seek refuge in something stronger that the ordinary mechanisms or of the ego or personality cannot have the capacity to hold. It may arise as a slow growing realization born of the passing days and years. Or it may come from a recognition that the way we perceive the things of ordinary life are leaving us hungry and incomplete, and that some deeper part of ourselves is yearning for a higher form of nourishment. Some believe only the certain few are called to fulfill their soul's destiny, and others believe it takes many lifetimes. Each of us, by the innate infinite intelligence that lives through us, is called to live a life that is reflective of the qualities of its creator. And while the invitation to a conscious spiritual evolution is our inherent birthright, it is entirely our own choice as to whether or not we embark on the journey once we are called. I love that the call can reveal itself in dreams and visions, pictures, symbols, books, teachers, even a profound philosophy or an idea. You know, there are as many calls as there are human souls, aren't there? But the voice of the call, I believe, is always the same. It says, come back, come back. There is still time. We're reminded that from a spiritual perspective, the purpose of life is to achieve soul realization, to be the full expression of who we are, that there is a transcendent spiritual essence within each of us, a potential known that is sought after from time immemorial. And when awakened, this spiritual essence removes seekers from the ordinary sorrows and confusions of life and provides heightened states of aliveness, joy, peace, and certainty. Now, there are many places of entry in the Thousand-Room Palace, each one affording us the opportunity to invoke our individualized creative soul's voice and hear its call. So I'd like for a moment to introduce 7 rooms, which have particular meaning to me. And so what's behind door number 1? Well, the first one is pay attention to the signs. I have a very dear friend, a sister friend of mine in Calgary, and she was telling me a story of her Indigenous elder who once said to her when she was going on her first quest, pay attention to the signs. So she entered the forest and she was quite dubious in the onset as to what, if anything, she was going to find as an insight. And as she was taking one foot after the other, she tripped and fell over this rock. When she face planted, she thought to herself, pay attention to the signs. So falling on the rock became the kernel of contemplation for her quest. Number 2, remember the soul hungers for the experience of life, and the mind is blessed by it. Number 3, take the shot. Be spontaneous while remaining in integrity with your own soul. Number 4, noticing when we are underutilizing ourselves or being overutilized by ourselves, so that we remain harmonious in our giving to and receiving from life. Number 5, let stepping up in what is ours to do mean opening to receive and trust, rather than taking a deeper and closer control of our circumstance. Number 6, embrace pain and our discomfort and our dis-ease within our body as all a part of the process of the awakening of the soul in this spiritual quest. And number 7, allow the experience of conflict to arise. Do not oppress it, because it is a gift from our soul. So I want to share a personal story with you dated back to the year 2000, when I traveled to Costa Rica with my ministerial teacher and friend. Now, during this adventure, we found ourselves on the West Coast in a national reserve for the giant leatherback turtles right on New Year's Eve. Now, having set out from a southern hot party spot named Hako Beach prior to the dawn's first light, we finished up our 13-hour land and water trek, and I might add here, not knowing the language. At the time, I was a professional clown, and I mimed my way through Costa Rica. And we landed at the reserve just about 30 minutes before dusk. Now, dusk is a very special time on this particular stretch of beach, for it is when the native tour guides bring nature lovers on their bellies across the sand ever so slowly and gently to witness the leatherbacks coming to shore to lay their hatches. Now, I'd done a little bit of research in that 30 minutes, and I found out that a normal hatch count is 80 eggs, out of which it is said that one will survive every 12 to 20 hatches in the nature of things. What an experience that was. So it was a few days after having witnessed that Marilyn and I were actually sneaking back to our hotel room after dusk curfew, that I felt a very soft fluttering sensation upon my ankle. I looked down to see the miracle of a baby turtle making its way towards the ocean. One lone newborn, with the odds of the natural world stacked against it, yet knowing exactly what to do and where to go. It did not stop to contemplate what would happen if it turned left instead of going right. I'm also guessing that there was no postulating that if it hit a bush, it would best turn around and surmise they were meant for something better. Excuse me. Now, this baby I decided to name Lola. That was my first mistake. The baby went just as fast as its legs could carry it. I tell you, right into this humongous wave, only to be pushed back again and again. At which point, knowing the odds, I bent down to pick it up just to help it on its way, when I felt this tight grasp jerking my arm back before I could make contact. It was Marilyn, my teacher. And she said to me, "Don't interfere with the soul's journey of that little turtle. It's none of your business." Well, I was actually rather shocked at her response. I never, obviously, forgot about that life lesson, And I watched in amazement as this tiny speck of intelligent life, circled by shorebirds, made it successfully into the flow of the ocean where, not so surprisingly, she knew how to swim. And then came the fish. Life can be tough. Here we have an example of the soul's call and the natural challenges that arise on its path. So, how do we reconcile the seeming paradox of engaging in and trusting the soul's call alongside the healing, the upset, resistance of the natural challenges that occur as we take one step after the other? And how do we deal with this feeling of conflict when it occurs? Well, understanding and applying the natural laws of attraction, correspondence, and cause and effect can help support us in realizing that as we are one in the mind of God, or another way of saying that is that universal infinite intelligence is sourced within us and expresses as us, and therefore only divine right order and divine harmony exist, then we can begin to open up ourselves to the idea that all perceived conflicts and all perceived solutions are spiritual in nature, and that all conflict is not external, but internal. So why then must we be set on the human path to reconcile and deal with internal conflict? Because without the natural resistance that arises when we have outgrown and no longer need a certain experience, or better stated, that certain belief that caused that experience, we move past the contentment and complacency which disallows the empowerment of us as an individual as we pass into and through and into it again, a state of divine discomfort. And because the resolution of conflict opens up the doors for feelings of accomplishment and peace, and moves us forward into a greater awareness and courage to enact our potential. I often think that no one of us is where we're supposed to be, but everyone is where they're meant to be. And that is the way, certainly, we have all together come to know the world, both outside and inside, over this past year or so. And although we know that much of the time growth experience rises within conflict, and we can be convinced of its clear value and function in retrospect, we think, is there no other way of learning our lessons, or I prefer to coin it, awakening to the light and experience of our truth? Is our spiritual truth always reflected in the conditions of our lives? Yes. And do we always see our spiritual truth in the conditions of our lives? No. So what would it feel like to see our spiritual truth and its infinite potential right in a difficult condition? Well, author Byron Katie, through her years of challenges, created something beautiful for the rest of the world to use as a compass to their true north. It's called the work. And it's one method of feeling our spiritual truth smack dab in the middle of the sticky, icky parts of relationship. She has 4 questions that she suggests we ask ourselves. The first of which is whatever this challenge is or what I'm feeling, is it true? Yes or no? Now, most of us will say yes, because it's a fact and we're feeling it. The second question, therefore, comes right behind it, and it is, can you absolutely know that it's true? Yes or no? Now, at this point, there's room for hesitancy through the word absolutely know that it's true. The third question comes, how do you react, or what happens when you believe that thought, the thought that it is true? And the fourth question, who would you be without the thought that it's true? And that's a perfect opportunity, if we choose to try out that method, to move right into affirmative prayer, to establish in the realm of absolute cause, the realm of all creation, spirit, who we are Not who would we be, but who we are without this thought. What would it feel like if we were in alignment with our soul's call as we create and move through life? I recently watched a Netflix series. Well, I've watched many Netflix series, but I just finished the one called Halston, the one of the infamous designer. And near the end of the series, he was sitting in a canvas fold out chair on a rock right on overlooking the ocean on the West Coast in California. And he was just months away from the end of his life. And he was looking at the ocean, and his chauffeur came up behind him and put his hand on his shoulder. And he said, Mr. H, we should go. You've been here over an hour. And Halston never broke his musing in his mind. And he said out loud to his chauffeur, he said, I used to look at this beautiful blue, this ocean with the light sparkling across it. And I used to think to myself, how can I use this blue and the many shades or variants of this blue in a new line of clothing? And who would I be dressing? And how would I promote this line of clothing? And how many pieces would I have in this line? And when would I reveal this line? And he said, now I just sit and I cast my eyes on the ocean and I look at this beautiful blue. That's what I feel and I have experienced as the soul's call. This beautiful blue, being absolutely in the moment of the recognition with all senses firing, still and fulfilled. And many of us notice the effects of chronological aging, while being astutely aware that there is something within us remaining essentially ourselves. Just as there are age-related stages of maturity in each of our lives, so are these sequential stages of spiritual passages. And these stages are not precise and cannot be measured. Matters of the soul are never so predictable, yet it is said that the soul unfolds through time and the human heart. Wendell Berry says, when despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world, and I am free. Sometimes we are introduced into our soul's call through divine intervention. I've had 2 such times in my life. Neither of these times were premeditated, and both were met with a fair amount of resistance at the onset and much of the way through. One was my first soul call to be a clown, and the second was my soul call to enter ministry. In the Buddhist philosophy, we are encouraged to get away from our rational systems and get into the wonderful experience that is moving through all things all the time. It is through living that we experience and communicate with spirit. It is through life that we learn to live in the spirit. One in full quest of the spirit knows that the goal of life is death, meaning non-grasping, non-attachment, release to reveal something greater than has gone before. And when we can embrace the messiness of our lives, we become a conscious participant in this larger flow. A flow that brims over with the ever-changing and ceaseless movement of life, of birth, of death, of tragedy and glory. As we remain still within the sacred marriage of the ego and essence, we are carried to a place that is filled with ease and grace. Being still in any anxiety or conflict will cause the truth to reveal itself. Being still will offer us unrestricted and unconditional entry to the only place that we ever have access to, right here. The whole discipline of opening to the soul's call can be conducted from the energy of love, or stated in another way, by coming into alignment with the constant state of change, of evolution, the oft intensity of God unconditionally and impersonally pouring itself forward through us. Loving and being loved brings us more fully into our human life, more fully to the only place we can live who and what we are, here. When we travel on our own path, listening and being guided at a soul level, everything is in perfect timing and can often feel like a surprise, for no precedent has been set. There is no precedence in God. God is spontaneous. Holmes calls the soul the essence of our understanding. Being pulled by our soul's call keeps us living in awe within a 1,000-room palace. And so it is. Amen.